Mana turns out, ancient viruses in frozen ground. There are viruses older than human civilization buried under the Siberian ice right now, and they're waking up. Not all of them. Most stayed put, frozen solid for hundreds of thousands of years. But some are active. Some are metabolizing. Some are hunting bacteria in the dark, in conditions so extreme that nothing else should theoretically be alive at all. And scientists just realized they have almost no idea what these viruses are doing down there, or what happens when the permafrost starts to thaw. So here's the question. What role could ancient viruses play in the next climate catastrophe? Most of us think of permafrost as dead ground. It's cold. It's locked. It's basically a freezer that's been running continuously since the last ice age. And sure, it preserves things, mammoth tusks, ancient pollen, the genetic material of extinct animals. But we treated it like a museum, a sealed vault. The assumption was that once you went below zero, life basically stopped. Bacteria. Sure, we knew they existed down there. Archaea too. But viruses? Nobody had seriously catalogued ancient permafrost viruses or tried to understand what ecological job they were actually performing in that frozen ecosystem. That gap in knowledge became the whole reason this study existed. A team of researchers from China University of Geosciences, the University of Southern California, the University of Tennessee, and the Russian Academy of Sciences spent years extracting and analyzing viral genetic material from Pleistocene permafrost in Siberia. We're talking samples from the Middle and Late Pleistocene, layers of frozen earth between roughly 1.8 million and 100,000 years old. These weren't casual samples either. They'd been preserved with scientific rigor in specialized facilities, and what they found inside those frozen cores was going to complicate everything we thought we knew about ancient viral ecosystems. Here's how they actually did this. Scientists took cores of permafrost. Think of it like ice core drilling, but specifically targeting the sediment layers between 2 and 4 million years old. Then they extracted the genetic material from those samples. Total DNA, total RNA. Then came the metagenomics. That's the key method here. Instead of trying to culture individual viruses in a lab, which is nearly impossible with ancient, unknown viruses, they sequenced everything at once. All the genetic code present in the sample. Then they used computational tools to sift through that data, looking for genetic signatures that match viral genomes. Computer algorithms stitched together the fragments, identified which sequences were viral, and compared them to known virus families. It's like having millions of puzzle pieces all mixed together in a box, and using AI to figure out which pieces belong to which picture. Except the pieces are genetic code, and some of the pictures are viruses nobody's ever seen before. The results were genuinely striking. The researchers identified 2,697 distinct viral operational taxonomic units. That's basically 2,697 different kinds of viruses. 2,500 different viral species in frozen Siberian ground. To put that in perspective, that's more distinct viral types recovered from one study of ancient permafrost than most modern environmental surveys pull from whole ecosystems. And here's where it gets weirder. The Middle Pleistocene samples, the older ones from roughly 1.8 million to 400,000 years ago, contained dramatically more viral diversity than the Late Pleistocene samples. We're talking about significantly higher species richness. The younger permafrost had fewer types of viruses, which seems backwards until you think about it. Maybe older permafrost just had more time to accumulate viral material. Maybe the climate was different then. Or maybe something changed in how viruses could survive over geological time. The researchers aren't sure yet. But the real insight came from which viruses showed up most. 3 viral families completely dominated the Pleistocene permafrost: Azaredovirini, Peduoviridi, and Fiersviridi. These viruses have specific host preferences. They target bacteria and archaea that can actually survive in freezing conditions. More importantly, The genetic analysis suggested these viruses carried what researchers call auxiliary metabolic genes. These are genes that viruses have essentially stolen from their hosts over evolutionary time, and the genes they'd stolen were specifically adapted for cold environments. Metabolic functions that help organisms generate energy, process nutrients, and literally survive temperatures where everything should die. The viruses weren't just passive particles locked in ice. They appeared to be active metabolic players in an extreme ecosystem. They were potentially helping their host survive the cold, which means they were playing an ecological role. They were part of the system. The implications are actually pretty serious. If viruses in permafrost are metabolically active and ecologically important, that changes how we think about thawing. Right now, we worry about permafrost thaw releasing stored carbon dioxide and methane into the atmosphere, ancient greenhouse gases that accelerate warming. But if viruses are part of the microbial community down there, and those viruses modulate how bacteria and archaea behave, then viral activity during thaw could influence which gases get released and how fast. A virus that helps its host survive cold might actually suppress that host's metabolic activity. Pull that virus out of the equation, thaw the ground, and suddenly that microbe starts breathing hard and releasing methane. Or the opposite could be true. Maybe losing these ancient viruses actually stabilizes the system. We don't know. That's the honest answer. The study identifies the viruses and suggests they're metabolically important, but it doesn't definitively answer how their activity will shift as permafrost thaws. It's a starting point, not a conclusion. There's also the sampling limitation to acknowledge. These samples came from Siberia specifically. Permafrost is scattered across the Arctic, Canada, Alaska, Greenland, other parts of Russia. Viral communities might be radically different in other regions, and this work is based on genetic analysis, not on actively culturing viruses or watching them in action. Genetic code tells you what viruses could do. Actually watching them do it is different work entirely. Still, this study sits at the intersection of multiple enormous fields: ancient microbiology, climate science, viral ecology, the question of how ecosystems respond to extreme environmental stress, and it's forcing the field to reconsider a basic assumption that ancient viruses were just frozen artifacts. Turns out, they might be active participants in one of the most volatile systems on Earth. That's the bigger picture here. For decades, permafrost research focused on bacteria and archaea. Viruses got ignored. They were assumed to be less important, less diverse, less interesting. But this work shows that viruses in ancient permafrost rival or exceed bacterial diversity in some cases. They carry genes for cold adaptation. They're probably shaping microbial community structure right now, in frozen ground, below the surface where nobody's watching. And we're about to heat up their entire world. Climate change is thawing permafrost faster than at any point in recorded history. That ground is warming. The viruses are waking up. The bacteria are waking up. The whole ecosystem is shifting. And we're just now starting to understand the viral half of that equation, which means we're making climate predictions, we're building models, we're setting policy, and we're essentially doing it with incomplete information. That's not the researcher's fault, it's just where the science was. The single most unsettling takeaway is this. We've been so focused on the carbon locked in frozen ground that we almost missed the viral ecosystem locked in there with it. And that ecosystem might be the difference between a manageable thaw and a catastrophic one. The viruses aren't the story. They're part of the story. But they're a part we've been overlooking. So here's what to sit with. If scientists are only now discovering what viruses in ancient permafrost actually do, what other crucial players in climate systems have we been ignoring while we focus on the obvious ones? Turns out scientists have been busy, and they're not done yet.